Welcome everybody to another episode of Just an Hour. This is a series we started, just as a way of us engaging with each other, our ideas, getting to meet people. So what we're doing today is we had a session last fall with some of our new faculty, but there were a couple of people who couldn't make it. And, these are people who have been with us for a while, but started during the pandemic. So we thought it might be a great opportunity for us to get to know them and their work better. Betty cannot make it today. She had some excuse about a dissertation defense, which is like, seriously, that's your excuse for not joining this group. But anyway, we will give that a pass. Just want to give a couple of quick announcements. The internal grants from the Office of Scholarship and Innovation, you should have received an email about that. Those are open. Proposals are due on the 17th of this month. If you are participating in an LFC already, we have made the process for reapplying for funding for the next year super easy. So we are hoping to support the existing LFCs into the year coming forward, as well as hopefully get some new ones. Of course, if you are, these grants are also available for independent research that you are doing. So it is not just for the LFC. So I just wanted to make that clear. Many of us are going to be at ARA. Sadly, I am not going to be at ARA, but, and Clarence, if you can drop a link to the ARA page that Paul and his team pulled up, it's actually very impressive. We have 141 MLFTC faculty and doctoral students who will be delivering over 200 different presentations at the conference. That just speaks to both the scale at which our college works and the fecundity of the work that we do. So that's awesome. I hope everybody who's going has a great conference. We have a couple of LFC events coming up. There is a book talk around humanizing education for immigrant and refugee youth on Tuesday, on the 22nd, and then Education Sustainability and Global Futures. LFC is hosting a whole series, the Earth Month speaker series. Those links were there in the newsletter, and hopefully we have good participation on all of those. Our final Just an Hour session for this academic year will be next Friday. And the topic is alternative forms for creating and sharing knowledge. And we'll be joined by Amanda Tasheen, Keon McGuire, Shermer Dorn, and Brian Nelson. We hope that all of you can join us as well. Well, without further ado, jumping into the topic of the day. So we have two faculty members who are joining us today, Ayesha, Boyce, and Shyla, Dogan. So with that, I'm going to actually jump into just having you briefly introduce yourself and what got you interested in the work that you do, and then we will just take it from there. So Ayesha, just going alphabetically by first name, actually last name too. Okay, just going alphabetically. You are it. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Do you want me just to begin by introducing myself, Punya? Okay, great. Hi, my name is Ayesha Boyce. I'm an associate professor. And let's see. I'm a mom and a wife and a Phoenix native, and my research has to do with methodology, program evaluation specifically. I have 3 interconnected research strands where I look at social justice, anti-racist, and issues of equity within evaluation. I also work in a lot of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, context within evaluation, and then I also investigate teaching and learning within evaluation. So happy to be here. I think we'll be talking more. So I will turn it over to my colleague who's also on the panel with me.
All right, Shyla.
Hey, I am Shyla Gonzalez Dogan or Doan, and I work on my degree was originally in educational leadership and policy, and I have a regional focus on the Middle East. I work a lot on also Muslim populations in the US, looking at anti-Blackness. I work a lot with and on immigrants and refugee populations, how to do more in terms of education and making equitable educational spaces. And I work a lot on community-based organizations and also community-led educational initiatives.
So, Shyla, since we have you right now on the spot, can you talk a little bit about how you got interested in these topics? Because I always find that story of how we got to the kinds of things that we study and that we are interested in very interesting and fascinating always. So maybe tell us a little bit about how these topics and ideas, particularly this sort of community-based work that you do, came to be.
Yeah, I think that it was something that started when I was growing up. I always believed that education, like I bought into the idea of education being the great equalizer. I am from a low income family, and my mother would always say, if you want a better life, go to school. If you want a better life, go to school. And so I heard all the time about the importance of school. And I saw that there was a lot of potential that was unfortunately not met in my family and in my community. But I also saw that the community picked up where a lot of times services and support systems that they say were there to help us left off. And so, you know, you could depend on your neighbor, you could depend on your friend, you could depend on extended family. And so I think that my focus on education and community comes from that. I also am, my father is from Turkey. And so my regional focus on the Middle East is very much focused on that and related to my heritage. But in terms of looking at kind of those community spaces and immigrant community spaces as well, I think that's also related to my heritage and my background and just having been active in them. I did my dissertation on anti-Blackness in U.S. Islamic institutions. And one of the reasons that I did that was because I know how important these community spaces were for me. And I felt like what I was experiencing and what I was seeing was inequitable practices. And I felt like, you know, this was a situation that was unfair. And there's a tendency for us to talk about anti-Blackness in relationship to white populations, but less of a focus on anti-Blackness as it relates to those who are non-white. And we don't really see the legacy that slavery and colonialism has created, I think, sometimes globally.
Thank you. Thank you. I think there's a lot here that we can sort of dive into and unpack. But one thing that you said really struck with me, this emphasis on sort of education and learning as being the only way forward. So I did this one activity once when I was in India. I walked, I think, a mile just taking pictures of everything related to education or learning. You know, courses like learn English, learn this, +2 coaching. I mean, it is, those posters and signs are all over. And then it sort of tells you that in a country like India, where there is so much poverty and so on, like everybody sort of recognizes the only way forward is by getting an education. And one of my former students tried to do the same thing in Lansing, in downtown Lansing, and was a cop car pulled up and asked her, what are you doing walking around, which I thought was very interesting. So, but anyway, but I think that point, I think, is incredibly important when we think about the role of community and sort of the broader cultural values that sort of signify what is important for children and youth to do. So anyway, Ayesha, on to you. So what brought you to what you do?
I kind of fell into the field of program evaluation. One of the kind of beautiful and a little bit scary things about the field of program evaluation is that anyone can be an evaluator. You don't have to have any special credentials. You can just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a program evaluator today. And for me, I finished up my undergrad at Arizona State in psychology, and then I finished a master's in research psychology at Cal State Long Beach, and then came back to Arizona and I worked for the Arizona Department of Education. And the job title was research associate. When I applied, they said, oh, you have all the kind of the right methodological skills. And on my first day, my boss handed me a book saying, oh, well, it's like actually an evaluation position, which is, you know, almost the same as research. So read this book and then, we'll get you evaluating statewide programs. And after being there about a year, I realized that I really enjoyed it. I like the applied nature of the work, but I quickly realized I probably should get more training. And after having sworn off getting a PhD, I was ready to say, I don't know if this 9-to-5 thing is for me. So I, looked for PhD programs. And even though I didn't want to leave Arizona at the time, I had the opportunity to go, to a place where there are a lot of really great people doing a lot of great things. And so I pursued and earned my PhD in educational psychology with a program evaluation emphasis at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, which you're familiar with, Punya. So that's right, ILL. And so after that, then I just knew I was just going to stay as a methodologist. So I don't have any a content or a context expertise. I learned, I was taught early on that, doing program evaluation is a lot like driving a car. You learn how to drive in one type of car, and as you go on, you can, get in a different car in different contexts and figure out what makes the most sense. And so that's how I kind of got into field evaluation. And then my advisor, she was really kind of committed to using a variety of methodologies and thinking about how we mix not only methods, but how we mix ontologies and epistemologies, and just really thinking about the kind of impact that evaluation has the potential to make, but also the field itself, like many other social science inquiry fields, are problematic and have issues of racism and issues with questions and answers being driven by capitalism, which inherently can be problematic. And so when I set off, I just decided to kind of investigate that and think about, from a methodological lens, how do you kind of attend to some of these issues and think about some of these issues. And so that's kind of how I came to be where I am now.
All right, thank you. Just want to be cognizant that if you have any questions for for Shyla and for Ayesha, please drop them in the chat or just speak up. Raise your hand or just interrupt me, because that's how I am used to interacting. Being from India, where you just start speaking. If you speak loud enough, people will give you the floor. But with that, since you guys have been here at MLFTC for a while, I'm just sort of curious about what's most exciting about any project that you're working on right now that seems like interesting and that you feel super excited to get up in the morning and say, oh, wow, I can't believe I'm working on X or Y. So what's going on that's fun and engaging and you feel will have impact? Either of you jump in, whoever.
Okay. We're like trying to make eye contact virtually. No, you go. I've been here. I'm in my fourth semester, but it feels like my first year. When I first came in July, 2 years ago in July, I was pregnant and I had my daughter in August. And so I really wasn't around and everything with COVID. So it feels like my first year here, really, this feels like my first full year. But I'm excited about a lot of things. I think the things that I'm most excited about are some of my research projects. I've had, the good fortune to be funded to be the external evaluator for a few National Science Foundation large scale initiatives. And so I have students who I'm working with to evaluate these projects. And it's been a lot of work, but it's been really great getting to know. I'm working with 5 PhD students right now on a variety of projects. And so that's been really exciting, getting to know them. Actually, we're all getting ready to head over to, 4 of us are getting ready to head over to North Carolina, my previous institution, where I co-run a research lab with my colleague at my previous institution. And so all 4 of us are going over the first week in May for a retreat where they're going to present on what they're doing. And the students from North Carolina will present on what they're doing. And so that's been really exciting. One of the projects is a large National Science Foundation Science and Technology Center. And so we've been conducting a climate survey for them. We've just finished up analyzing the results to kind of see what's going on. There's some interesting things happen, which kind of require like additional follow-up from interviews after the quantitative data. And so we're kind of gearing up to do a whole bunch of interviews. And so that's exciting. And I think the really exciting thing is that the clients that we have worked with have been really appreciative. They've been incredibly engaged. And so that's been really great. And then from the teaching side, I'm teaching 2 courses this semester. One is like the practicum for the program evaluation course. And so the students have been working with 4 different clients, 2 within ASU, 2 within the community, and conducting evaluations for them. And we're kind of wrapping up the semester. I feel like the semester's over. And so everyone's been getting ready for their final presentations. And then I also am teaching anti-racist approaches to research and methodology, research and evaluation methodology. And that's been a really, really great class. We've had some great discussions, especially because all of the students come from various backgrounds. And so what race and ethnicity means to me and the importance that it holds in the United States is completely different in places like Turkey and Ghana and Syria and Afghanistan, right? And so having those conversations has been, I've learned a lot myself as well. So that's been really great.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's a really great point, because I know, that people sort of label somebody as a person of color, but that means so many different things given your historical, cultural, and other backgrounds. And that's something that I've had to navigate too, because sometimes I'm asked to speak for groups that I cannot in any shape or form speak for, just because I have not had that experience, though it might look one way or the other. So thank you. That's awesome. Shyla, what's fun? And I have to say, both of you have new babies, so we want pictures too. So congratulations on that, and navigating that, and parenting and academia and teaching. Hats off as always to all of you for managing all that. But Shyla, what's fun and interesting right now?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think, similarly, I'm also really excited about different projects I'm working on. So one thing is that I signed a book kind of contract or book deal or whatever. So I will be turning my dissertation into a book, but also I'm going to be doing some research to see how things have or have not changed in many U.S. Islamic institutions after the Black Lives Matter movement. So that's one thing that I'm working toward and I'm really interested in. I'm also doing some smaller projects with graduate students that I enjoy, particularly on it's sort of local research, small projects related to refugee populations here in Arizona. And yeah, I mean, I just really appreciate and like the freedom I have. I feel like I have freedom here to do what is meaningful to me, and that I think, there should be more of in academia. And so that's kind of what I'm excited about, just having that freedom to do that.
Yeah, I still forgot to unmute. All right. There was a question here. So Yalda had a comment that Ayesha, that she has students who are taking your class and loving it. And Margarita sort of jumped in as well with that. Can you talk about, you said you have a student from outside of MLFTC. This is something that, I have talked with Jill about once in a while, which is, I don't think we promote our courses as widely across the university as we can or should. Because last semester when I taught my design and education class, I actually had 6 students from HIDA and just 5 from MLFTC. So it's sort of the equation flipped. And Margarita, you and I have talked about it as well, that in the methods courses you usually get. So I'm just curious about sort of the experience of that, and how did you sort of promote the class, or did it just so happen that the student popped in?
I promoted it because I wasn't sure if the class was going to go, the anti-racist courses. So I sent emails to people I knew. I asked for it to be promoted in a couple of places. And then I hope that word of mouth would, and I actually have 11 students in that class, which is nice for which is not bad for like a master's PhD level class, but I hope that, I actually have a few students on who are in that class. So I hope that, if I have the opportunity to teach it again, that it will be even larger, because I think the different perspectives really add a richness that I wouldn't be able to bring myself. So I also completely agree. I actually think even the evaluation course at my previous institution, it was a service course for the institution wide. I think, as others have said, like, evaluation is a skill. I don't think everyone has to be an evaluator, but we all come into contact with evaluation. So we should all know how to be, know how to be consumers of high quality evaluation. And so I definitely would would love in the future to figure out how we can kind of advertise more and get more diverse student backgrounds in terms of the degrees that they're pursuing in the course. Because I actually think it could be like a high sort of level master's course as well for a master's student, maybe in their second year.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And I think this is something about the fact that you promoted the class outside of is something that I think all of us should take to heart, because I think some of the topics and the things that we covered, whether it's evaluation and or selfishly speaking, this idea of design and education, are ones that are relevant to conversations and students outside of MLFTC as well. And hey, extra student credit hours never has hurt, So Carla, I think is that a comment? Do you want to address what you just typed here so that we can have this conversation go on?
Not really. I just thought even if we're not planning on being an evaluator, there's a value in learning more about it, what they do and what kind of sources of data they look at, so that it can be more of a partnership from those of us who aren't actually evaluators, but are doing grants and hiring evaluators, so that we can know what they're doing and just get a sense of that and make it more of a partnership than a one-way communication.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the audience? I'm sure there must be some, particularly from the grad students. I would love to hear from the doc students. I can wait.
Well, I could chat with Ayesha about, I think one thing that I learned similarly coming from our EPE program, I thought research and evaluation were one and the same. So my first job was hired as an evaluator, and I learned very quickly that those skills differ. So maybe for anybody here, what would you say is one of the biggest differences between research and evaluation?
I think she should ask the students who are in that class.
See if they know that.
They didn't know they were signing up for an impromptu exam when they signed up.
Well, I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, I always have told people myself, I think the biggest thing that I learned, especially having been trained as a researcher, is that usually you are the one driving that, right? And so in evaluation, you're very much serving somebody else's questions, and it's a matter of finding what they are trying to uncover and then using your methodology that does apply from your research or training to uncover those questions. But it's usually a really different approach or a different initiation than what a researcher would do versus an evaluator. That's my own perspective, I think. With a sinus infection, so some clouds in there too.
All right. So I think there's one difference, I think, between Shyla, the work that you do, and Ayesha, which is Ayesha, in your case, once you have a reputation, you have people know you, NSF grants and so on, so you get invited to be an evaluator, you're part of that community. I think in Shyla, in your case, you're building these relationships with the community in order to, and these are often spaces who may not be comfortable speaking to researchers or academics because of historical, cultural, whatever reasons, right? So I'm just curious about what effort goes into building those, and how do you support and nurture them?
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's difficult, right? Like, I think you have to go in and try and get to know people at a more personal level. When I was doing my dissertation work, for example, I worked with a lot of folks that I already knew and who knew me. And then, it kind of branched out from there. So folks would say, I would want to do interviews, and folks would say, well, you should talk to my buddy so-and-so. And then, I would call that person. They'd be like, no, I don't and I'd be like, well, I'm a friend of so-and-so. And they'd be like, oh, okay, well then, yeah, I can sit down with you and chat with you and things like that. But I did know a lot of the people, if not as like friends, as acquaintances, or like in passing, because I was part of that particular community. But I also think that, trying to make an impact within communities, like when you talk about, for example, working with like refugee resettlement organizations here and things like that, like Rice. Rice is a big one here. And I really like Rice because it's very much refugee run. Like generally everyone there that works there is from that background. But I think it's also about like building a relationship that's not just about my research, right? Like it's not all about me, and trying to build some kind of a whatever it is for myself, like tenure or name or whatever. It's also about building a real relationship to those folks. And so when they asked me like, hey, would you help out on this grant application? Can we put your name down? Like, of course, why would I say no to that? Right. And so, and if it takes me a few minutes to like look over the proposal or whatever, it's not just about building the relationship for my research, but it's because I actually care about the community and what they're trying to do. And so I think that once people kind of get that sense from you that you actually do really care, and that you're willing to stick around, right? Like you're not just going to go in, do interviews and then ghost them. I think that folks are a lot more enthusiastic about what you're trying to do, because then it starts to feel like, oh, we're in this together. And I think that's one of the things that I like to draw attention to with my research, is that I want people to think about like, what does solidarity mean, right? Like we may talk a lot about, especially immigrant populations or marginalized groups, right? Like how things are impacting your own community. But I also want us to question like, who is part of our community, and why do we consider those individuals to be a part of the community and exclude others, right? So yeah, so I hope I answered that question. You're on mute.
All right, I officially give up on Zoom. That's it, we're done. We only meet in person from now on. No, thank you so much for that, because I think that aspect of building those relationships, and then that they cross over away from sort of not from the professional to sort of being something that you are genuinely engaged in, is like a really important component of that. And you have to truly care about it. Otherwise, you can't fake that kind of interest. You know what I mean? So I think that thank you for that. But I'm going to flip a little bit on this and say, what are some of the challenges that you have faced as you look from going from your doctoral work to the work that you're doing now? And then Ayesha, I'll jump on to you about challenges that you face as an evaluator in these spaces, because you might be seen as somebody who's coming in to judge, their project or something. So how does that work out? But maybe Shyla, since we are with you right now, speak a little bit about some of the challenges that are there, because I think these will be issues that many of our students, doctoral students who are wanting to do the kind of work that you're doing, will have to sort of think about before they even jump into that.
Yeah, I think bridging the gap from graduate school to being a professor can be difficult. They don't teach you how to be a professor in graduate school. That's not the goal, right? So, and I have one student that I work with at UCLA, and he's super smart. We're working on a paper together, working on a project, and he has like within his brain, all of this literature and these authors, and and then he's sitting down with me and he's like, I have no idea how to write a paper. Like, I really don't like what do they want, and I talked with him about it, and I was like, you don't know because they don't really teach you how to write a paper for an academic journal. Like even a paper for a class is a little bit different. Like there's certain, depending on the journal and depending on, what kind of field you're in, right? Like there's a certain formula that they expect. And, you may have read 200 books on this topic. They don't care about all that. Like you have a literature review that's this big, and you have a point to make, and so you got to make that point, right? So I think that was difficult. I mean, they certainly tried, I think, to prepare us for the next step, whatever it would be, but it's difficult. You're also trying to learn theory and methods and all these other things. So I think that bridging that gap has been a challenge that I feel much better about in my third year than my first year. And I also think the faculty success program helped a lot with that. I think it was great. And that was something that everybody was recommending to me. And I'm so glad that was money well spent. I'm so glad that I did do that. And I'm glad too that they pointed out to me, I remember the person who was kind of like our leader, that she pointed out to me that, you also don't have to do this. It is like a job. We are if you're in a tenure track position in particular, you're told that like, you're super lucky and there are a million people ready to take your job and take your place. So you should, just be really grateful. And I think that it was really important for me to understand that, yes, it's important to be grateful, and it's important to acknowledge that you do have a wonderful position, but at the same time to also realize that, like, in terms of your life, if it doesn't make you happy in the end and overall, that like you can also walk away. And that's not something I plan to do, but it was just nice to hear someone say that, because that wasn't the message that I was given throughout graduate school. The message was, you probably all won't make it. And if you do, you're super lucky. So never leave, get your tenure, never leave. And, just thank God every day that you made it. It was kind of the message that we got. And then in terms of challenges in working with different partners and communities, I think that that I have faced a lot of challenges in terms of research. I mean, particularly going into spaces, particularly with Black Muslims, and asking folks like, okay, now tell me about some of the worst experiences that you've ever had in institutions where you should be feeling safe. And that was really difficult. And there were folks who, asked me like, why do you care? And there were times that I definitely felt like maybe this type of research and this particular topic is not for me to be working on. But I also felt like there needed to be people not just people from the Black community saying that these are issues that we need to confront. Like, we need to all be addressing these issues. And so I felt like I had a responsibility to do that as well. And sometimes, of course, there is the emotional labor. I recently did a project that was funded by AERA with Dr. Garine Palandijan. And the project was we were interviewing political exiles and asylum seekers and refugees from Turkey, many who had been like victims of torture. And so, that was also very difficult in trying to relate and understand when someone is telling you about an experience of torture, right? Trying to be understanding and work through that conversation, knowing that like I myself have not experienced that. So it's, those are, I study a lot of difficult topics.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, and also for sort of the stuff that what you said earlier when you were talking to sort of directly to the graduate students about sort of the challenges of transitioning from grad school to academia, to a job, and that at the end of the day it is a job, right? And that it defines us in many ways, but it can't be the be all end all of who we are as individuals, as citizens and so on. So thank you for that. Thank you. So Ayesha, you sort of, I think, have a different set of challenges. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Sure. I'm trying to decide what I want to share. I think, for me, I'm just going to go with and just continue with what Shyla was talking about, because I think that's pretty interesting. So this idea of like what it means to be on the tenure track and what it means to be working in this space. For me, I spent a lot of time reflecting on it in terms of as a woman, as a mother, as a person who kind of cares very deeply about those around her. And I've earned tenure at ASU, I've earned tenure at my previous institution. That's something I'm very proud of. And after my first year in the academy, I actually was like ready to go. I had talked to my chair and I was like, I don't think this is the right fit for me. I don't, like my first author paper was a desk reject. A couple of grants that I had submitted didn't work out. I was trying to figure out, at the time I was, my husband and I were trying to figure out, okay, well, when is a good time for us to start trying for children? And I was like, this probably isn't going to work. I just can't really see myself here. I can't see how to be myself here. And it was really great to have really positive and supportive mentorship. And I decided to stay, right? And I decided to stay. And now when I think about all of the reasons I would have left and all the reasons why I would have stayed and why I did stay and why I continue to stay, I've ultimately realized that in order for me to be successful in this space, I've had to decide to just like be my most authentic self. And either that's going to work or it's not going to work. But me like not being able to bring my full self to work, that wasn't going to work out for me in order for me to stay. And so, I mean, I've kind of just been practicing this idea of like radical but professional sort of transparency in everything that I do. And so, for example, I adopted this like citation policy where if anyone who helps with a paper or anything like that, or a research article or a presentation, everybody's name gets put on, whether you help with the literature review, whether you help collect the data. So you'll see this, like you can see in my CV how this has changed. So like my two most recent publications, I am first author, but there's like 7 other people. One I have actually an undergraduate who helped with something, and I'm really proud of that, right? I also have papers where I am writing by myself because I don't want a tenure committee to be like, oh, well, can she do it by herself? Yeah, I can, but that's not the point, right? If you look at my syllabi, when I go and look at other people's syllabi, I cite them. I say, pulled from this person's syllabi, these ideas were pulled from here. And so for me, that's been really important. In a lot of ways, it's been really freeing because we're supposed to like define who we are and, differentiate ourselves. But also like, I'm a human being, like I care about my students. And so what's been nice here is I've been able to really be thoughtful about even the ways in which I can support students in my position, right? So, for example, the evaluation course, if the students who are in it know, what I decided to do was we had a client that we were working with, and then I actually politely asked the client, like, let's actually no longer have you be, because you have money to pay us. So let's not have you be one of the clients for class. It's an equity issue, right? Let's have you, I'm working on securing a contract, and every single student in the evaluation class is going to get paid. Every single student who wants to, there's 2 who have opted out, but all the other students in the class will get paid over the summer to work on this evaluation project. Whereas there were other community organizations who they can't afford an evaluation. I'm like, well, you all are the ones who actually should be getting a free evaluation. And the ones where it's not a lot of money, it's like $10,000, right? But I'm like, $10,000 goes a long way, even when split across, 5 or 6 graduate students. And so I always think to myself, like, what are the things as a grad student that I needed more of? I needed one, micro affirmation, someone telling me like, wow, good job. Like, I'm really impressed. I needed more money, especially over the summer. So even if you look at my grants, like I don't put myself on for that much. Like it's like most of it gets pushed to students over the summer. And so I just try to practice the idea that I may come into class one day and be like, yeah, my 1-year-old was up. And so I'm tired. I'm just being honest. Like I'm here, I'm ready to engage with y'all, but I'm tired today. I had a really important colleague and mentor who passed away earlier unexpectedly in January, like the 2nd class. And I was crying in class because I was like, I'm really sad. This is really impacting me. It's impacting the field. And it's important that you know that you can have $4 million in grants, you can have a whole bunch of publications, but you're also still a person first. And there's a way to survive in this environment in academia, in which a lot of people can call toxic, but there's a way to make a space to be yourself and make space for others to be authentic and to be able to stay here. And so I think for me, that's what I'm kind of committed to. And it's interesting because I feel like I had just kind of figured out how to fully do that in a way at my previous institution. And then transitioning here, it's like starting all over again, figuring out the politics and policies and where do I fit and what am I doing? But then I just decided like, I'm just going to keep doing what I do. And I'm glad to hear that when other people say, oh, your class, they're enjoying it. Great. That's great because that's what I'm going for. I care very deeply about my scholarship, but I also care really deeply about my pedagogy. And I want that to show up in everything that I do. So.
Wow. Thank you, Ayesha, Shyla. I mean, I feel it's such an honor to be in an institution and organization where people have these kinds of values and they articulate it in the work that they do. And so thank you so much, both of you, for sharing that. Anything I ask after that is going to be such a letdown. So because I do hope that the doctoral students who are here, who have joined us today, take that to heart, because I think that piece that you spoke about in both your cases in sort of different ways about the authenticity of bringing yourself into that space in ways that are authentic to you is really the only way that one can thrive and actually do good work. Otherwise you are faking it for someone else. And what sense does that make? And it's a fictional, mythical someone else, because we never know who that is, right? What is an organization, right? I mean, so thank you so much for sharing that. I'm just going to again ask all of us, the people here, if we have any questions to follow up what I think was really a very lovely, passionate sort of description of why we do what we do, the work that we do. So thank you again. But any questions, comments, follow-ups to that?
Hey, Punya, could I just really quickly say that I just really appreciate, Dr. Boyce saying those things. And, I think that it's really important that students understand that if you fill out a place, like, so do a lot of other people. I fill out a place, like I believe that I started filling out a place the moment I started college, because I didn't have people around me who had gone to college. I graduated from an alternative school after getting kicked out of high school. Like, that's where I felt at home. I was like, these are my people. We've all gotten kicked out of school or quit school. And then going to college was a very different experience for me. And then I have one degree from Columbia University. That was a weird experience, right? Like, I felt totally out of place at Columbia University. People that I thought that I would relate to, I couldn't relate to. Like, and even now in my current position, there are often times that I feel that I don't belong, or I'll be in a meeting and I'm like, wow, I can't relate to anybody here. But at the same time, I think that we also are our own worst critics, and people value others more than what we may quite understand at the time. So valuing transparency and folks who are willing to be vulnerable and speak out about things that make them maybe feel insecure. I think that it's important for students to understand that they're not alone in those feelings, and that a lot of us have been there and maybe are still working through it, right? Like, and that's okay. It's fine.
Thank you for that. And I do appreciate, like I said, both of you being comfortable in being vulnerable in this space for others to hear your thoughts. So thank you for that. I'm looking at the time. One more call, if any other questions, because I have a few that I can jump into. Wait time.
Just one question. Both of you we're very lucky to be in community with you, both of you, first of all. And throughout some of your comments, you've mentioned sort of the intentionality you put into meetings with students and the partnerships you build with students and the community you cultivate with your doctoral students, master's students, all types of folks. So my question to both of you is, what are some lessons learned about research team formation and sort of do's and don'ts of cultivating community for students as a faculty member? And I ask this because I'll refrain from why I'm asking it and maybe share with you all some other time, but I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Mishra. Anybody wants to go first?
Sure. This is something I struggled with early on. When I received my first two kind of external funding, and I had a couple of graduate students, I had all these meetings, right? Like, I'm meeting one day to talk about your independent study. I'm meeting to talk with you about your dissertation. And it was just like this deluge of meetings that was overflowing. I was like, this is a horrible way to be living. And I still have a lot of meetings, but I remember going to my chair and saying, like, how do people manage their grants? Like, there must be some sort of training. So then I'm like looking up online. Okay, how do you manage your grants? How do you manage your labs? And he's like, I don't know. I only have one grant. And so then I was like, okay, well, you know who has like multiple grants and multiple projects? People in psychology. So I went to the psychology department chair. I was like, well, I was working with her on something else. I was like, well, how do you train? How do you provide opportunities for your new faculty? And she was like, oh, I don't know. They just do it. And then I went to the biology department chair. And I'm like, well, surely where they're required to have a lab and there's like so much stuff, surely they have training. Oh no, it's just trial by fire, they figure out. And after I was, horrified, I like sought to go get training on like management and like develop my own interpersonal skills, which I was able to find a few, but I don't think there's like enough training, right? I mean, I think one of the things that I've learned really hard is that like, there's a very small line between being someone's advisor and being like, you probably need to talk to a therapist. And I have often erred on the line of like, I'm not a therapist, but here's how I would do this. I mean, especially working with graduate students, they're at such, not that undergraduate students are not, but in more ways than others, like there's marriages, there's divorces, there's births, there's deaths, there's miscarriages, there's infertility. There's all of these things that students are like feeling and that are right there underneath the surface in a way that certainly is present with graduate students. Thanks, Stephen. Certainly with undergraduate, but it's really, I find, unique with graduate students. And then there's all that like, and yeah, like I really need you to try to like for real work 15 of these 20 hours that you're assigned, because someone's going to be like, what's happening? And so I would just say for me that I've learned that early on, to try to develop, like, I don't want to micromanage you. I don't need to like know exactly how many hours you spent, and my grant doesn't require that. And I know some people do work like that. But for me, I'm like, there are discrete tasks that need to get done, and here are the dates. I need you to meet these dates. And if you can't meet them, let me know before you can't meet them. One of the things I let my students know is I'd rather something be late than you to turn me in something that's not high quality, in your opinion, because I don't want to waste my time. You don't want to waste my time. No one wants time wasted. And I've tried to display that with them as well. And so the way that I manage my research is I have a senior graduate student who's the lead on the project, and they liaise with me frequently. And then I try to have like a secondary person working with them, maybe for fewer hours as like a support person. And that secondary person may be a lead person on a different project. And so then what I try to do is we have bi-weekly meetings. So right now I have actually 5 graduate students who I work with, 4 of which who I meet with regularly. One was hired just as a methodological expert to do some web scraping things. So he doesn't meet with us as frequently, but the other 4, they kind of support each other. And so I find that is a little bit more of a burden for them, because they're going to each other first saying, hey, how do I get this Qualtrics thing in here? And I'm like, yeah, ask them before you ask me, not because I don't like to be asked. Everyone has my cell number and can text me, but also like, it's a good skill to develop as kind of a lead person. And so that way, when we have team meetings, I say, okay, everyone go around and say what you've been working on, and everyone kind of reports. But even when it comes to like drafts of manuscripts or research papers, they've exchanged it with each other before it comes to me, which I have found has like just taken a little bit of, I don't know, grammatical and sort of like editorial things off my plate. And I haven't begun working with undergraduates here at ASU. I'm still trying to figure out how to make that happen. But at my previous institution, then there will be undergraduates who would also be a part of that support team. And the undergraduate students would help with a lot of support, things like collecting data, making the tables for surveys, fixing transcriptions, not transcribing, but fixing the transcriptions, which I think everyone should know how to do, but is not a good use of graduate student time. I think they're really expensive to have them go and fix the transcription, unless you're going to use things verbatim all the way through. So for me, I've tried to figure out how can I scaffold and how can I organize myself and organize my team such that we don't need to have 5 meetings about the projects and then have a group meeting. So I've tried to, and I've also had them do how-to videos. So I have a how-to video on qualitative data analysis, a how-to video on setting up Qualtrics, a how-to video on IRB. That way, when someone new starts, I'm like, yes, we can definitely meet. I want to meet, but also like I have the meetings 8 to 5, right? So I'm like, go watch these videos and then let's have a talk about it. So I find that having people work with each other and when possible, and then also just attempting to kind of have a little bit of an onboarding process can be helpful. Although I will say I've like not perfected it at all, but those are some of the ways that I've tried to work.
Thank you, Ayesha. That is very thoughtful and organized. So when I was at Michigan State, at times I had like 9 doctoral student advisees. And I realized that my week would just go by working with somebody who's in their first year, trying to think of their early research project, which is something that they had over there. At the, then the next meeting would be with somebody who was trying to defend their dissertation and working on their final or whatever, and everything in between. And what I started doing was I just started bringing everybody together, and we would do, 2 hours, but we would talk about everything. And what I didn't realize was the benefit that it had for the beginning students, because they were watching somebody who was preparing for their final dissertation defense, and they could give feedback. So there was this, this was genuine, legitimate peripheral participation, but it also made my work so much easier in some ways because they were sort of mentoring each other. And that's a model which once I figured it out, it was very powerful. Our productivity went off the roof too, because people are working on things together and giving feedback to each other. So I sort of hear exactly sort of similar idea that you were talking about here as well. Shyla, anything that you want to add?
I'll keep it super short because I'm not that organized. I am taking notes. I would say that when I work with students, one of the things that I've always told them is that focus on the moves that are best for them. So if that means that they want to change advisors and work with someone else or whatever it is, whatever works for them, then I tell them, like, don't feel bad about that. Like, you have to focus on, getting to where it is that you want to be. I'm always here. And my students have always come back to me, whether it is to work on a project or ask a question or whatever it is. And I appreciate that. I come at it from a very sort of like personal, maybe a little too like, I love you guys and want to support you guys kind of a way, but I do love them and want to support them and see them do well. And so that's sort of the focus that I have. And I feel like the majority of the students feel like they have a real relationship with me where they can say like, hey, I'd like to work with this professor. What do you think? And I'm like, that's a great idea, because they do something different than I do. Like, go for it, So yeah, and in terms of projects, I have learned a lot from senior professors who kind of took me under their wing and brought me in on grants or brought me in on papers and projects. And, their ability to be like, okay, next meeting, this chunk needs to be done. Like, y'all need to get this done. That's something that I had a lot of trouble with. And because I didn't want to be very assertive with people. And I also understand that people are busy, right? I'm busy too, and it can happen. But if we want this paper to be written, you really have to do this. Like we're either going to do it or not. And sometimes things have fallen through, and I'm like, you can come back to me when you have more time, because I can't focus on meeting to say that we need to get this written when we've done that twice already. Like, I can't do that. And I also, I'm a pretty introverted person. I'm focusing on tenure. And so I do a lot of independent work. I work a lot on my own, but one of the things that's been really beneficial to me in working with students is just the ability to designate tasks and stay on them to get it done.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, I think this also speaks to, one of the themes of this conversation has been, being your authentic self and bringing yourself into that space. So that also means that each of us is going to work with students, work with each other in different ways. There is not going to be one right way of doing it, right? And also that it's an evolving thing. It changes depending on the nature of the interaction with the student, where they are in their career, what's going on in their lives at that moment. All of those things play in. But I think what stands out for me, and I think, I think I speak for everybody who has joined us today, is how much, and I've said this before, how much I appreciate the two of you sharing your experiences and your stories here, and being very open to sort of sharing, your lived experience of doing this work, and how proud I am of to be a part of an organization where I have colleagues like this. So thank you so much for joining us and for sharing. Any last thoughts before I move into some final announcements? Shyla, let's go with you. Okay, Ayesha.
I don't know, just a quick reminder, if you haven't told your graduate student that you're working with that I'm proud of you, you deserve to be here. I think you can do it. They don't need to hear it like every day, but I mean, you'd be surprised at what a difference it makes. Like, I'm glad you're here. I think, I have to remind myself. I actually have little reminders to myself to be like, say this. So just that quick reminder, and to colleagues too, right? Sure. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, because there were these, my kids played a lot of soccer, and the two best coaches that they had, one sort of told all the parents that I don't want you after the end of the game to say that you played well or you played badly. I want you to tell them that you love watching them play. That's it. And I was like, that is so profound. Right? That's it. Truly, I didn't care if they won or lost. I just loved being out there watching them do their thing, with soccer or volleyball or whatever it may be. And the other one was, which I think for grads, like advice for everybody, is this soccer coach who would stand on the sidelines of the game. He would never give any advice on who to pass the ball to, who was open. All he would say is, what do you see? And the idea was that you are always looking where the ball is going to go, and you have to figure it out. It can't be something that the coach is going to be yelling at you from the sidelines. And I always felt that was such a really deep statement, because it is, what are you seeing in the field? Where do you want to go? And then let's work towards getting there. So I think that was really, anyway, I don't know why I shared these two stories, but they've been very meaningful to me personally. But again, really want to thank you, Shyla and Ayesha, for joining us today. I think I speak for all of us that this was really a great session and just wonderful to hear from both of you. Quick couple of announcements that I've already made before. The internal grants are open. If you have an existing LFC, it's super easy to go for the next one, next year of funding. If you want to start an LFC, if you have any questions, reach out to us. If you're doing a research project that you want some support on, again, reach out to Claren and Betty and me. We are always available. ARA coming up, and we have a couple of LFC events like the book talk, as well as the Earth Month speaker series. Details are in the newsletter. And our next session meeting, the last meeting of just an hour, will be next Friday on the topic of alternative forms of creating and sharing knowledge with Amanda Tashine, Kian McGuire, Shermer Dorn, and Brian Nelson. So with that, I just want to thank all of you again for joining us today. I know this is a busy time as the semester is unbelievably close to being done. I can't grasp my head around that. And have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you in and around MLFTC Farmer or on Zoom. Thanks, guys.